Good. Welcome to part 2 of our Money Makeover series. Since we have a whole totally new set of people here, I'll kind of do a small review on what we did last week. We covered part 1. We covered cash flow, and we covered debt management. Cash flow, we looked at what is cash flow? Cash flow is understanding what goes in and what goes out on your monthly income. Income going in, going out. And then we talked about budgeting and why that's important. We talked about the difference between budgeting and what cash flow is. We talked about how you need to look at you should look at your finances as if you were a corporation. How would a corporation manage their finances? And we did a case in point. Case in point, most individuals, especially when I talk to them, how do we do our budgeting? We do it in our head, right? Oh yeah, we're getting paid tomorrow. Gotta go to the grocery store on the way home. Car notes due, right? We did this scenario, if the way that we're managing our finances now, if we were a corporation, how successful would our corporation be, right? I do have, and I'll pass this around. We also gave out this how to develop a budget. What things you want to look at, what things you want to emphasize. We talked about 4 enemies to your wealth. There's 4 enemies to your wealth that you want to be concerned with as we talk about cash flow, as we talk about debt management, and throughout the whole entire series. There's 4 enemies to your wealth. The first one is taxes, right? And studies show that over your lifetime, you would spend over 30% of your entire income just on taxes. 30%. So over your lifetime, if you made $1 million, 300,000 of that $1 million would go to taxes alone. So you can just cut that pie just out of there. All right. So properly understanding how your taxes work helps you significantly keep more of your income. All right, the second enemy to your wealth is inflation. That's the silent tax that most people don't talk about when we talk about long-term growth, cash flow, things of that nature. Right? A gallon of milk 10 years ago was right about $1. Right? Now it's approaching $6. All right, so understanding that inflation continually goes up. So next week when we talk about building wealth, inflation plays a huge role in that. Understanding that wherever you're putting your money, it has to be outpacing inflation. So we talked about banks. We talked about having savings account. Are they good? Are they bad? We talked about that. But when it relates to inflation, you have to look at it. If I'm getting less than 1% on a savings account, and inflation is usually anywhere from 3 to 4%, and is my money really growing in the bank? All right, so things of that nature. All right, and then we moved over to debt management. Understanding that there's 2 types of debt that we went over. We went over manageable debt, and we went over debt that is not manageable. Now, what's the difference really quickly? Manageable debt is debt that if you budget correctly, you're disciplined, you're able to pay it off on your own. Your income can allow for you to pay that debt off. And we talked about a method, the snowball method. Everybody familiar with the snowball method? Where if you have If you have 3 different bills or 3 different credit cards that you're paying off, and you're paying $50 to each of those credit cards, right? And you end up paying one of those credit cards off. What do you do with that $50 that you've been paying? You roll it into the next one, right? So now you're paying $100 to the next credit card, and you pay that one off. What do you do with that $100? You roll it up again, and it starts what's called a snowball effect, right? So you're accelerating your debt, manageable debt. You're accelerating that debt by utilizing the funds that you're already used to paying, and now directing it towards the debt to accelerate the debt. All right, so that's manageable debt. Then we talked about debt that's not manageable. Your income does not allow you to properly pay off that debt in a timely manner. What options do you have? All right, we talked about debt consolidation. We talked about the pros and cons to that. We talked about bankruptcy. We talked about the pros and cons to that. And then we also talked about debt negotiation, all right? And we talked about the pros and cons to that as well, all right? And which one makes sense for you? Well, really briefly, when you consolidate your debt, all you're doing is taking all 5 of those credit cards and putting it in one, and you're paying all of it off, including the interest, all right? So just consolidate and you're paying it off. When you go through bankruptcy, depending on which one you go through, you're eliminating that debt, but it has an adverse effect on your credit. All right. And then when you talk about debt negotiation, there are companies out there that will negotiate your debt with your creditors. And instead of paying the interest and the balance off, you're actually paying a fraction of the balance and none of the interest. So you get to pay that debt off in a timely manner with a more manageable monthly outlay. So we talked about that. So now we're going to go into our 2 topics for this evening: emergency fund and proper protection. All right. Everybody good? We awake? We good? We good? All right. We gotta talk back, so we're keeping it moving. All right. So question: what is an emergency?
What is an emergency?
Right. Car breakdown.
Something unexpected.
Something that is unexpected. Right? Now, the question that arises with the emergency fund is, does it mean that it means if an emergency happens, or is it actually when an emergency happens? Which one is it? Are we questioning if emergency happens, or actually when it may happen?
When?
If? So when we say if emergency happens, well, we're looking at it in a realistic standpoint, right? Does everybody go through an emergency at some point in time in their life? So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. All right? So if you think about it in those terms, you'll understand why having an emergency fund is super important when you talk about your overall finances, right? Emergency fund is your short-term savings, right? It is a short-term savings that you have readily available for short-term needs, right? Now, normally, you look at having an emergency fund, and it's normally looked upon as having either if you have a budget, you know how much your expenses are per month. It's having a 3 to 6 month savings of your expenses, or some people look at their income and they say, well, I want to save 3 to 6 months of my income. All right? Because it's not if, it's It's when. Let's go to it real quick. All right. So it says, when facing an unexpected financial challenge, don't let your backup credit cards or payday loans build your cash reserve today. How do most people handle emergencies? Most people have cash on hand to handle emergencies?
No.
Or do they utilize other devices? Right? Such as credit cards and things of that nature. Now, is that the best way to go about it, using credit card? Think about it. If you had to deal with an emergency, what tends to happen when you have an emergency and you limit what's called your options when you have an emergency, right? Because you need it right away. The challenge with that is that it's a lump sum. Let's say, for instance, you went to the mechanic and the mechanic said, well, now you need 4 new tires. Has anybody had to buy 4 new tires at one time before? All right? That's an emergency, right? Something unexpected that costs a significant amount of income, of money at one time. If you use a credit card for that, now, in an emergency and you don't have the cash on hand, but you're at the mechanic shop and you can't leave without that card, does the mechanic shop know that most people have an emergency and don't have cash on hand? Do they know that?
Yeah.
Yes. So what do they do? Or what do they have available for you? Right? They have it already laid out. They're like, I know this is I know this came suddenly, probably wasn't expecting it, but we have something for you. You can finance this, right? Whenever you hear the word finance, you got to be very leery, right? Because now you're putting a $400, $500 charge on a card, right? And what comes with that card?
Interest.
So instead of that, so instead of getting a deal if you have cash, right? Because you can, let's say for instance they have a sale going on, you get the 4th tire free, right? But you gotta have the cash. But if you don't have the cash, well, we'll put it on this card for you and we'll charge you 18 to 29% on top of it. So by the time you finish paying that off, you didn't pay $400 to $500. You actually paid $600 to $700 for those tires. Now, so you may be saying, okay, how do I start and how do I build an emergency fund? All right. Now, based on what we talked about last week, it starts with a budget. Right? Once you put a budget together, now you understand what your discretionary income should be at the end of the month or for that month. And we talked about there's only 2 ways that you can increase your discretionary income. Only 2 ways. Anybody know what those 2 ways are?
Get another job? Get a second job?
One way, increase your income. Good.
Decrease your debt.
Say again.
Decrease your debt.
Decrease your debt, or decrease your expenses, right? Only 2 ways you can increase your discretionary income, right? So you have to start with a budget. Once you have a budget, you understand what your discretionary income is, and now we're able to look at how much can we put towards long-term savings, which we'll talk about next week, short-term, which is emergency funds and other things like accelerating debt and things of that nature. All right? It says here's a simple way to start your emergency fund or add to the one you already have. Choose a different amount to save each week depending on your cash flow. In 52 weeks or a year, you'll have $1,000. Right? Give or take. All right? So what it really suggests is that we have little pockets change that we have every so often. We'll walk around with, you know, if you still walk around with cash, right? And you have leftover from, you know, spending for lunch or whatever the case may be. What is recommended that you do is put that extra change that you have away each week, or determine in your mind how much money that you are able to put away each week, and determine that that amount and put it away. And what you realize that over time that money will grow. All right. Now that's one way. That's what it suggests. My humble opinion is that you would look at your budget and designate an amount each month to put away. All right? So if you know that you have, say, $500 of discretionary income, all right, and you decide that, hey, I want to start with $50 a month, you start with $50 a month, and you just grow, and it grows and it grows. Guess what happens, right? As you could decide to do that, what rolls around every year, right around January, February, March, April?
Tax?
Tax return, right? And everybody's just waiting for that tax return, aren't they? Right? Instead of looking at that tax return to see what you're going to spend it on, look at it in sections. So you can say, okay, I can designate some or a portion of it to build my emergency fund. And by the time you turn around, you'll start out with you'll have that 3 months or that 6 months. Now, what is really recommended as far as a good amount to have as far as emergency fund? The traditional amount or the traditional space of time is 3 to 6 months, all right? But because of our economic climate as of lately, we actually started to educate our clients that we see on a day-to-day basis to actually think about increasing that. Instead of doing 3 to 6 months, you want to make sure you have 6 to 9 months or 6 to 12 months. For individuals that are saying to themselves, I want to start a business, right? A good rule of thumb is you want to build 12 months of emergency fund. Think about it. If you were to say, I want to actually dive into this business opportunity that I have, and I have 12 months of my income saved up, would I be concerned about paying my bills for that year? Because I have it saved up, right? So you'll be able to concentrate more on that business because you have that 12 months of emergency fund or 12 months of your expenses saved up. Things of that nature.